The farther we push into the development of the story, the bigger the engineers got, and the more marginalized the original alien monster became, until that monster became a kind of feature or grace note in a larger story that was about humanity meeting its makers.
Welcome to our Part 2 video for Prometheus. If you haven't seen our Part 1 video, you really need to see that first, as we are continuing to look at an earlier draft of the Alien Engineer screenplay by Jon Spaihts. We had left off where Fifield and Milburn left the expedition to return to the ship in a more believable manner, and no crewman was stupid enough to take off their helmets in this version. With that said, let's continue looking at the script. On the ship, Vickers is back with the captain checking a weather front moving in, and she seems more interested in the expedition now that a major find has been discovered. We then cut to Milburn and Fifield, who are standing at a main junction with many different tunnels. They are not sure which way to go, and Fifield asks for Milburn's map. Milburn is shocked and says he thought Fifield had the map. In disgust, both men head back the way they came to find the others. Meanwhile, the explorers enter a new area where there is rain and atmosphere. In the area are honeycombs of pure gold, translucent alabaster flutes, and matrices of crystal. They note there is huge power sources nearby. Holloway and Watts, along with 3 others, head down what looks like an elevator, while David looks in another direction, coming to his own conclusions. He beckons Chance and Ravel to follow him. Uncertain, they follow him rather than the others. Down below, the team notice Chance, Ravel, and David are missing, but Holloway is insistent on moving forward rather than going back to look for them. However, David can be heard talking to Chance and Ravel, so they decide when they're finished they'll go back to them. Despite this, Milburn and Fifield are lost and start arguing about geography. So Milburn, not caring about saving face, tries to contact the ship directly. His comms are met with static. Below, Holloway's team discovers an engineer that has been decapitated. His body has hideous slashes and cuts through his bone. They then notice that there are a dozen dead bodies of engineers stacked by a wall with similar wounds as if they were massacred. Holloway states that there were giants documented in the Bible and quotes scripture. And when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, they bare children to them, who became mighty men. He then states that all the old giants in mythology must have been engineers. Then a garbled transmission comes in from the ship stating that they need to get back. A storm is coming. Holloway wants to argue, but Janek orders him to return. We then cut to a rover returning to the ship with a body of an engineer under a tarp. As they arrive to the ship, they already see David, Ravel, and Chance safely back. Shaw is yanked away by the storm, and she hangs on like the film. David quickly reacts and saves her. When everyone is safe, Shaw thanks David, and the rest of the explorers congratulate the archaeologists over their theory being proven. Then they notice Fifield and Milburn are missing. On the bridge, Janek tells the 2 lost men to hunker down for the night. Later, in the mess room, everyone is celebrating the incredible find. On the bridge, David is looking at images from the pyramid intently, following patterns of energy. Vickers approaches him and says, "We're going to Protocol 2." To which David says he understands. In a lab, Holloway and Shaw inspect the engineer's decapitated head in a sterile environment. Then Shaw notices that the head looks like a mask and pries it open to reveal an engineer's head. And it looks human, just giant. Holloway is quick to comment, and God created man in his own image. In his own image created he him. Then the head disintegrates, reacting to oxygen, and they pour formaldehyde over it as the room fills with fumes. When Holloway and Shaw get clear, Vickers' voice sounds out from an intercom in another room. "Your cadaver's interesting, but I'm more interested in the machinery in the pyramid, the core chamber. What do you think it does?" Holloway is confident that he knows the answer. He states that satellites have picked up 24 similar pyramids on the planet, and inside the pyramid there was oxygen, rain, and huge power readings. He concludes they were terraforming the planet with the pyramids. He suggests that the pyramids on Earth were cultures imitating their god's construction. He also states that on this planet they didn't finish the job because their civilization failed, to which Shaw corrects him and says it didn't fail. It was wiped out. Back in the pyramid, Milburn stupidly picks up a 3-foot-long centipede with a shark-like mouth. Fifield tells him to put it down, but Milburn tells him to relax, stating their suits are bulletproof. The centipede does just like the hammerpede did in the film, and it has acid for blood. It burns away Milburn's hand as the centipede snakes into his suit. Then Fifield tries to help Milburn as he falls to the ground. He pleads with Fifield to cut off his arm, but then the centipede bursts out of his mouth in a bloody mess. Fifield runs out of the room in horror. He keeps running and comes to another insect room where there are scarabs, and these bugs are flying all around him because of the light in his suit. He desperately brushes them off to no avail. Then he starts smashing some of them, but like the centipede, they have acid for blood, and the killed bugs make holes in his suit. Then a scarab enters his melting faceplate and bites him on the cheek. Fifield panics as he feels his body stiffening. A microscopic cut shows DNA strands being changed inside Fifield's body. We find Holloway and Watts in their quarters, and Holloway states that now they know why the engineers never came back. They were killed about the time of Christ. He then muses that Christ must have been an engineer too, maybe the last engineer. In Vickers' quarters, in a secret room, 4 hibernation pods slide out of the walls. In them are hardened mercenaries who are awakened. Vickers is their boss. Holloway and Shaw are collected by a soldier and brought to Vickers, who tells them the moment they found alien technology, their mission was placed under her control, and it was in their contract. On a monitor, David is at a work site in the pyramid, inspecting terraforming technology, and Vickers states that colonizing planets is a rare commodity. Trillions was wasted on Weyland's Mars project, and most planets do not have the right conditions to support life. But with the engineer's technology, everything will change. We then cut to the pyramid later, where Watts and Holloway arrive at the location of the terraforming equipment, which David, Chance, and Ravel are back engineering and dismantling it. They are guarded by 2 armed mercenaries. Elsewhere in the pyramid, Janik and 4 of the crewmen look for Fifield and Milburn. Shaw and Holloway slip away from the back engineering team and head below. Watts states they found the tomb of the gods, but they brought grave robbers right to the doorway. Holloway, confident, says, "Let them scratch. This find's too big to ruin. There's 24 pyramids on this moon. Anyway, they're on the wrong track." He then states that the main core of activity for the complex is in the lower levels. As they head deeper in the facility, they see many dead bodies of engineers, most with exploded chest wounds, as if something burst out of them. While Shaw looks at something, Holloway slips and falls down a shaft that seals behind him, and Shaw calls out for help. Janik has just found the body of Milburn, and the centipede is seen exiting the area, and it's 6 feet in length. They find Fifield's helmet, but no body. When the call comes over their comm about Holloway, they say they can't help at the moment, as they need to sterilize the bodies and destroy them. David states he will help Shaw. When he arrives, he goes with her below. By the time Janik has collected the bodies, another storm is approaching and they need to leave. David is very protective of Shaw as they look for Holloway, and they are shocked when he stumbles out of a corridor without his helmet on. He is dazed and weak, and David gives Holloway his helmet as he doesn't need one. They make it back to the ship, and after decontamination scans, Holloway takes his shirt off in the washroom. Around his neck are red marks, like he had a noose around his neck. Shaw enters the room while he's brushing his teeth, and he says he saw something, and that his mouth tastes like an old boot. She notices the mark around his neck, and he says he thinks it's from the suit when he impacted the ground from his fall. He states he woke up walking deliriously, and his helmet was punctured and malfunctioning, so he took it off. He said he saw a cathedral and a model of the galaxy floating in the air. he saw Earth on the map, and he also discovered that the planet they are on is just an outpost. The engineer's civilization is going to be on that map, and they need to find it. His helmet's tracker should still be operational despite the damage, so hopefully they can retrace their steps to find that room. He says, above all, they need to find that room before Vickers gets what she's looking for and leaves the planet. Shaw agrees, and then they have lovey time. But Shaw asks why his heart is beating so fast. He says it's because of her. Then he begins convulsing, and a white snake-like alien bursts out of his chest. She screams, and it is pushing out of him and targeting her. She runs into a closet, but the alien, like an octopus, tries to squeeze under the door. Janek and another man enter the room as the alien jumps into a vent. Shaw breaks out of her closet naked and bloody. She runs to Holloway, who is gruesomely dead. Shaw is then given a sedative, while Holloway's body is bagged and secured. Then Janet takes everyone to the arms locker, so everyone can defend themselves and search for the creature. In the pyramid, Fifield's body writhes in a dark place. His face is gelatinous as the back of his head elongates. There are sounds of pain from Fifield. Janek is now holding a meeting. It's been 5 hours since Holloway's death, and they haven't found the parasite. Shaw bursts into the meeting, now showered and clean, stating that they saw engineers with the same chest wound Holloway had. She states that whatever killed the engineers was still alive and aboard the ship. Janek suggests, "We're a modular ship, self-contained life support, and power in every section. I say put the ship in orbit, vent every compartment to space, sit in vacuum at 20 degrees Kelvin for a week, kill anything." Vickers doesn't like the idea at all, saying the ship doesn't lift off till the work is done on the surface. Then an argument ensues. They have 3 people dead in less than 3 days, and Vickers states they are dead because they were careless. They don't need to be careless. Shaw uses the opportunity to slip out and heads to the spacesuits. She goes to Holloway's suit and takes his tracking chip so she can find the map room he longed to discover. She then leaves the ship. While she does this, the crew break off into search teams. When Shaw arrives at the pyramid, she notices Chance and Ravel still working on the terraforming equipment. However, she quietly slips below into the bowels of the pyramid. Back on the Magellan, a lone crewman peers into a shaft and suddenly something snatches him up into the vent, killing him. A few moments later, the bridge is informed another crewman has died. In the pyramid, Shaw arrives in a room that is honeycombed with cells like a beehive. In them are creatures. At her feet is Holloway's helmet. She picks it up and inspects his playback and witnesses a facehugger thing attaching to his face. This facehugger is more like a worm, and then she sees a dead facehugger on the ground. She then notices many honeycomb cells in the room and spider-like creatures hanging from webs, which are similar to the facehugger that attacked Holloway. Note that these facehuggers are very different than the facehuggers you know from the Alien series. When Shaw realizes the danger she's in, she books it, still following his feed to find the map room he spoke about. On the ship, after finding the body of the killed man by the alien in the air duct, Janek wastes no time. As he is walking to the bridge, he yells to the crew to prepare for takeoff. The bridge crew states that their navigation computer is not responding. Janet immediately turns to Vickers and says, "What have you done to my ship?" Back in the pyramid, Shaw finds a hangar where a Juggernaut engineer ship is sitting, with landing gears down and ramps leading into the middle entrances of the ship. She enters and discovers the pilot's room and the galaxy map Holloway spoke of. Then a door in the room slides open, and it's David. She tells David that the creatures that wiped out the engineers were being bred in this pyramid. David calmly tells her that he knows. He states he's learned a great deal studying the ship's systems. She's shocked, telling him they need to quarantine the facility. David basically says that's not going to happen, and she says she is ordering him to evacuate with her. David seems a bit annoyed and then states that his first order was to help her with her research, but after they found game-changing technology, Vickers overrode those orders. Now his mandate is to ensure neither Holloway nor Shaw spoke of this place to anyone, and with that said, Shaw turns and runs. David tries to close a door on her, but she manages to get out just in time. David sprints after her her, and the script notes he caroms off the walls and closes in on her. We then cut to a scene where Shaw awakens in an alien egg chamber. David is dragging her in this room. As he drags her towards the egg area, he states the ship has 7 cargo bays like this one, and that there are many different types of eggs. He also states that the Juggernaut's last flight plan was made 1700 years ago, and it was supposed to go to Earth. David stops and touches an alien egg, which opens. Shaw tells him to stop, but David continues and tells her that the ship intended to use the eggs to destroy the population of Earth. As the facehugger climbs out of the egg, David touches it, but it ignores him and scurries to Shaw's leg, but David grabs it by the tail. The thing wiggles in frustration. Shaw is confused and asks, why would they do this? And David, staring curiously at the creature, says, "And the Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, for it repenteth me that I have made them." He then looks at Shaw with pity, and then drops the facehugger, which immediately jumps for her head. The facehugger then settles on her, and David says, "I know, I met my creators the day I was born. I was disappointed too." On the engineering deck of the Magellan, 2 armed men are attacked by something described as a humanoid white demon with small limbs and a bony back with a big tail. It attacks the men. One is killed instantly. In Vickers' quarters, she desperately calls for David, who either doesn't receive her message or care to answer it. On the bridge, Janek pounds his console as the bridge crew listen to another man being killed by the creature below. They can do nothing. Shaw wakes up by a dead facehugger in the egg chamber. She spits out gross, viscous fluid from her mouth. David is nowhere. She runs in panic. Upstairs, Chance and Ravel are working on their terraforming engine when Shaw drives off in their rover. When Shaw gets to the ship, a crewman asks where she's been. "You were better off outside. It's a fucking madhouse in here." Shaw ignores him and races into Vickers' cabin after she sees her heading to the bridge. It is then that she goes into the med pod asking for an emergency cesarean. The med pod does as expected, and the creature is taken out and dropped on the floor. While the pod works on Shaw, the creature crawls into Vickers' cabin, escaping. Shaw watches the white alien slithering across Vickers' bed, then she lapses into unconsciousness. Shortly after, a soldier enters the room and immediately is alerted by the blood everywhere. He sees Shaw being worked on in the med pod, but when he turns back to the room, a creature is already on him. The white thing kills him. His weapon slides next to Shaw's med pod as he falls. After he is dead, the creature slowly begins to transform into the alien we know from the first Alien film. With its back to Shaw's med pod, it crouches over the dead man's body. After more time passes, Shaw wakes up in her med pod. The procedure is done, and the humming machine releases her. The alien is still crouched over the man's body. We don't know how long it's been sitting there, and Shaw has been worked on. Near her is the gun the soldier dropped when the alien killed him. Though in pain, she cautiously and quietly grabs the weapon. The alien turns, hearing the gun move, and it lunges for her, but she sprays it with bullets, killing it. She then finds a jacket to put on and makes her way to the bridge. When Janek sees her, she states that Vickers said she was dead. When Vickers enters the bridge, Shaw punches her. She then reveals to everyone about the aliens in the ship. The engineers plan to use them on Earth. Outside, a strange hangar opens up in the ground, revealing the Juggernaut ship that was below, and Shaw tells Vickers to tell David to stand down. Vickers states, "He's blocked my communication. He can't hear me, won't listen." So the survivors decide to go get David and deal with him before he accidentally launches the ship, which is programmed to go to Earth. Janet remains armed in his ship while everyone suits up, including Shaw, to stop the android. Vickers then tells everyone that in order to get David's codes, they just need his head. Before the team enters the engineer's ship, they find both Chance and Ravel dead, with dead facehuggers beside them. It is stated the two have been dead for over 8 hours, suggesting that Shaw was in the med pod for a very long time. As expected, the group runs into a juvenile alien, and it's easily killed by gunfire. Despite the sight, they go to the door that Shaw instructs them to go to, where David came out of earlier. They enter to see David standing over a sleeping engineer. who is breathing. Vickers orders David to stand down, but David informs her that he's free of her orders now because he studied the engineer's ship, and to fully understand it, he changed his codes and behaviors. Basically, he rewrote himself. Then the engineer wakes up. He is 15 feet tall with black eyes looking like a Greek statue. The engineer ignores the small petty humans and goes to machinery, where he looks at readouts. Vickers flees the room with her guard. Others stare in wonder, but the engineer looks annoyed. David speaks to it in a strange language, and it understands him. The engineer seems angry at David. Now I need to go on a small tangent here to describe something that the script really doesn't explain, but Jon Spaihts directly referred to this scene later and confirmed that upon waking the engineer, it was already impregnated by a facehugger, and that is why it was in stasis, hoping that its kind would find him and save him. However, when David woke him up, he is now doomed. This is why he was outraged by these humans waking him up. So now that you know that, let's get back to the script narrative. David desperately tries to talk to the engineer, but the engineer is enraged and rips David's head off and throws it aside. One of the mercenaries starts shooting at the engineer, who rushes towards an alcove. The engineer is shot a few times, but it doesn't seem that hurt. While in the alcove, the elephantine suit of the engineer is placed around the being. Then it simply walks out of the room as mercenary bullets bounce harmlessly off of it. The engineer simply ignores these pathetic humans and heads into the pilot room. We then cut to Vickers, who is fleeing with her mercenary, and they come upon the transformed pale creature that was once Fifield. The disgusting thing jumps at her guard and wounds him terribly before it jumps on Vickers. It looks at her face, and then it leans closer, saying, "You." Vickers' guard, who is dying, fires off a few shots at the creature. The beast is hit and falls over Vickers. The creature's acid covers her as she dies horribly with the Fifield creature. Back in the hibernation room, the decapitated David tells Shaw that the engineer said they killed him, and in retribution, it is going to launch the Juggernaut to deal with the humans once and for all. David then releases the codes to the ship, unlocking its navigation systems. Shaw looks at the remaining 3 survivors and tells them they must stop the engineer. They all head into the pilot's room, and the 3 mercenaries immediately start shooting the engineer. However, the being is not affected, and then it pushes some device and all their guns are immediately inoperable. Then it launches something at the humans, killing them instantly. Shaw flees the area towards the exit, while the engineer cares nothing about her. Then a pilot's chair rises out of the middle of the ground. Shaw manages to make it back to the ship. When she reaches the bridge, she sees an alien biting into Janek's shoulder. The man is struggling, but Shaw shoots the creature. It releases its bite, and then she shoots it in the head, killing it. It dies. Janek says he needs her help because one of his arms is useless. As the body of the alien's acid burns into some of the floor, it's pretty clear the ship isn't going to be working in space anymore. He asks Shaw to take the stick. In the Juggernaut, David's head rolls a bit until he can see the engineer in his chair. The Juggernaut takes off. The engineer convulses while mid-flight, and suddenly an ultramorph alien rips out of his chest. David tells the Magellan crew that now is their opportunity to ram the Juggernaut to stop the ship. Outside, the Juggernaut shudders and loses altitude. With the opportunity open, Shaw crashes the Magellan into the Juggernaut. In this version of the script, the bridge isn't at the front of the ship. As it states, upon impact, the modules of the craft separate. Janek is still killed by debris, but as the bridge module separates to go to the ground, Shaw runs to an escape pod still in her suit and ejects. Anyways, after her pod lands on the ground, the Juggernaut is on the ground rolling like a dropped hula hoop. Shaw passes out. When she awakes, she sees the Ultra Alien leaving the Juggernaut in the distance, and it sees her. There is a lot of burning debris around her, and she tries to hide in a sleep chamber. But then her suit's oxygen alarm goes off, getting the creature's attention. It hits the pod, causing the sleep chamber to roll away, and Shaw is thrown from it. She manages to find a hull saw, which is used for ship repairs. When the creature comes at her, she ends up swinging the saw at the alien's head after playing cat and mouse for a little bit. The saw impales the alien's skull. Acid erupts from the wound, and it is dying on the ground as she runs away. Shaw eventually finds a life pod, which turns out to be Vickers' module. David contacts her through his comm, says he can still be of use to her if he can be repaired. Shaw turns off the comm. A long span of time passes, and Shaw walks through the wreckage in a military spacesuit with a rifle and pistol. She pulls a cargo dolly, salvaging equipment. We can see the Ultra Alien's head hanging as a trophy outside the Vickers ship module. After she enters the module, she undresses and sits at a chessboard where David says rook takes bishop. She moves the piece. David asks her if she will help him, and she says she's going to hold out. She won't fix him. David replies that someone will come, but will it be mankind or engineers? He then asks her what move she will make. The film ends with Shaw sending out a beacon for help. The script ends stating that this signal is a beginning. Now look, there are a lot of things to say about this script, and I'm very passionate about it, but I'm not going to talk about it right now. When we get to our film coverage, we are specifically going to break down the Lindelof additions as well as Ridley Scott's changes to this script. For now, I'll be clinical and just look at how these things were changed. When the fourth draft was finished, Arthur Max was hired as production designer for the film. Max had a team of about 5 people, whose job it was to constantly draw up designs for the film. Ridley would come in and guide them with his well-known Ridleygrams. Spaihts would also visit to answer questions about story points with Ridley's blessing. It was not uncommon for Spaihts to walk in the next day and see the scene he spoke about the day before depicted visually. A lot of early concept drafts have a lot of unique ideas, and I suggest the Art of the Prometheus book if you're a fan of this film. For instance, when they were designing engineer ships, the original intent was to go with a classic juggernaut, but Ridley allowed them to experiment with ideas, and Scott even entertained the idea of the engineer ship being a pyramid configuration. But in the end, we know that didn't happen. Spaihts was asked to do another draft, and he would usually go in the office looking at art, then head home to polish scenes with the images in his mind. Ridley even spoke more about the film to the public. On April 2010, Ridley announced he wanted to make the film 3D, but that it was a challenge to do this because 3D is usually utilized in colorful environments. And since Alien was dark, not only in tone, but lighting, it would be a challenge to achieve that. Spaihts would write a 5th and final draft called Alien 01 Genesis, dated July 9th, 2010. The script was very similar to the last draft, but there were some minor differences, so we're going to bullet point them right now. In this version, there was a new scene after Holloway and Shaw discovered the archaeology site at the beginning of the movie. In it, we would see the scientists at a London University museum where we would meet Professor Church, Holloway's mentor. The scene concretes that every major civilization in ancient times were manipulated by someone among them. It specifically states that the gods were giants or beast-headed demons moving among men. In this version, instead of going to a space station, Weyland's headquarters was on Earth in Amsterdam. In this script, during the space flight, David watches Shaw's dreams. But in this version, she is a little girl playing fetch with a dog while her father watches. Vickers is even more corporate-centered in that she is impatient for the scientists to find the planet during their survey, and notes that there's only 12 months of waking operations for the ship. Vickers bitches at them as they go from planet to planet, stating they are not finding anything fast enough. The script takes more time visiting many of the 24 sites that would be eventually revealed as terraforming stations. After a few failed flybys, they would come to the pyramid covered in the first script. Once again, in this version, there were no moments where the crew stupidly takes off their helmets. Once again, with Spaihts in charge of writing, the approach was mainly logical and scientific, with exception to Milburn picking up a centipede. And that's really about it for the changes on the fifth draft. After finishing it and turning it in, the art department's work had really affected the direction of the film, and by the time the script was finished, it was already obsolete. By this time, Ridley announced to the world that his Alien prequel was ready for filming. But the more the art department drew of the engineers, the more the engineers became more interesting. It was pretty clear the direction was moving away from an alien-focused film to an engineer-focused film. Spaihts would later say that the studio watched Inception, and the studio felt that Inception was very unique and smart, and they were kind of bummed that they were focusing on making just another sequel or reboot. Tom Rothman was definitely behind this because he didn't want the aliens to be the big aspect of danger. The easy thing to have done would have been to just make an Alien prequel, and that's where it started as an idea. But as we talked about the last time it evolved, and Ridley's ideas are much bigger than that, it really is a brand new film. Spaihts would clarify further by saying, the studio wanted to reframe the whole thing in terms of the engineers. What if we just pulled aliens out of the title and pushed the monster even further back, and Prometheus was just the name that came out of that shift? The more the discussions occurred, the more everything got destabilized, because the production was very close to moving on to the next step, which was casting and set construction. But the studio kept encouraging Ridley to mutate the idea. Now, a lot of folks also say that Ridley Scott defined the direction of the film too, and they would be right. But Jon Spaihts' quote clearly implies that the studio desired this direction. Still, changes kept occurring, and the eventual title reflected this. At first, the film was called an untitled Alien Project. Then the names that they would go through was Alien Engineers, Alien Genesis, Alien Origins. Then after the studio started pushing the project away from Alien, new titles such as LV-426, Paradise, and Tomb of the Gods was pitched. One title was favored by Ridley, and that was Paradise. But in the end, the title stayed in flux. For now, we have to end this video, and there is still so much to uncover. But in the next video, we're specifically going to focus on the mutation of this film, especially the involvement of Damon Lindelof. And if you want an idea of some of the changes that are coming, I'll leave you with this.
It does seem very possible that we could get infected by an alien species. What do we do if that happens?
You alert the nearest team leader, and he or she will set you on fire.
And please, if you think we're worthy, support us on Patreon, where $3.50 a month will get you early access to videos and updates on channel projects. With that said, we'll see you soon. If you like what you see here, click like and subscribe. Super thanks helps, and so does sharing. We'll see you next time.